Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be chatting about Threads of Power, but also alongside that, the original Shades of Magic trilogy. So this will be a spoiler discussion, and we will likely be talking spoilers for the original trilogy as well. So if you haven't read that and you started here, I'm very curious what you thought of it because all of us kind of feel you should read the original trilogy first, but regardless, just wanted to give that heads up. So I thought we'd start with just overall thoughts as we usually do with these sorts of discussions, but I want to add to the overall thoughts. Do you think after having read the entire book that this even is a good place to start with this world, since the marketing seems to be saying you can start with either? So Kristen, I'll let you start with overall thoughts and then also that question.
So overall, I ended up really enjoying it. I found that the beginning wasn't necessarily holding my interest as much, but since the chapters were so short, I still was able to read it like really quickly until I got to the point where it really like got me interested. And then as for the original trilogy, I think that there's absolutely no way that you could read this book without having read Shades. And if this were to be your starting point and you wanted to go back to the original series, I don't even know what would be left to be a surprise because I feel like everything is just flat out spoiled. Like every single big event from all three books is recapped in Threads.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. What do you think, Steph?
My overall thoughts, I struggled with this book actually. The first like 30% kind of, as we discussed in the group chat, was really hard for me. Like I was interested obviously because I do like the original trilogy, and so it was nice to see these characters in a different time in their lives, and seeing where they're at 7 years later. But I really struggled with the pacing, I guess, and I think I went in with the wrong expectations. I really thought, because this was marketed so much as like this is a great starting point for this world, that we were going to focus more on new characters and that our older characters were going to be like background. We were still going to see them, but it's pretty much just like a continuation.
Yeah.
So that being said, I feel I really liked the last 20%, but I absolutely think that this is not a good place to start unless you really don't care about the original trilogy. You could totally start this and like understand what's happening, but if you care about the original trilogy, then I would not start here.
Yeah. What do you think, Jesse?
So I really loved it. I think I actually had an easier time in the first like 30% than a lot of us talking, but like it was slower. I will agree. The beginning was slower, but I found it still like really grabbed my attention right away. I also do agree though that I was a little shocked because I also thought that it's like we're gonna get mostly new characters and then like a sprinkling of our originals.
Yeah.
And that was not the case. So I'm gonna go with the consensus and be like, this is not a good place to start. I would have been very confused, I think, if this would have been my beginning to like the shades of magic. Like, yes, the world can make sense and the magic can make sense, but you're getting all these characters and you're like, yeah, back when this happened, and there it's just
Right.
dropped like you are expected to know it. And yeah, I think the
Especially
marketing
especially
no.
given that she fills you in with what's transpired since then, but then she'll reference things from the original trilogy. So I would imagine that if you're new to the series, that starting here it'd be like, wait, am I supposed to, is that from one of the 5 years ago parts and I missed it, or is that something from the I just think it would be a
Hmm.
little disorienting.
I'm also
Agree.
curious if someone were to start here, if they would have like any kind of like the same emotional connection that we have
Right.
to the characters. Like
Hmm.
I feel like we have such a history with them, and to go in, they might be like, "Why should I care?" Like that
The
this is going
few
on.
reviews I saw of people that started here, which at first I'm like, why would you do that? But then I saw the marketing saying that you can definitely start here. And they didn't, the few I saw definitely were like, I don't know who's who and what's what and why I should care. So I don't think that it proved successful for them. But I am curious if there are people out there that are going to start here and then they'll treat the original trilogy like a prequel trilogy. That would be interesting.
Mhm.
Roger, what did you think overall?
Overall, I didn't really like the first 30%. Time skips are always kind of a hard sell for me. And I don't think that this time skip was done in a way that I really liked, because it kind of, with where book 3 left off, if we were going to stick with our main characters, I would like to see Rye meet his wife and have that kind of dynamic, see Alucard and them kind of figuring out their dynamics. We just kind of jumped into these new character dynamics that weren't what I remembered. And so I was like, well, why do I care about this new relationship with his wife? Why do I care? Like, she's kind of annoying. So there was just a lot of those moments happening in the first bit. And then once we got towards the end, I started getting more into it, but I also would agree. I don't think that you would have a good time starting here. I don't think you'd understand why Ryan and Keller connected when she keeps dropping about how, like, if Kel dies, Rye will too. Like, what? Like, there's no information on some of, like, key pieces that you would need to be like, oh, okay, I understand, and I understand the stakes of when Kel's doing stupid stuff, or why he doesn't want, I can't remember the new girl's name, why he doesn't want her to fix him. Like, that's a whole huge fight between him and Lila that I don't think you'd have context for if you didn't already know why that was a thing. And I think there's lots of things like that.
Yeah.
And the magic itself, too, I think, given that the first one, while some of the magic is slightly ambiguous, and I think her magic system falls within the in-between of hard and soft, at least you have some explanation. And this one, every now and then, will give you a little heads up of how it works, but not really. So I feel like a lot of people
the only way they did it was with the new White Queen, where she was kind of learning the words from the word. That was like the only way that you like got an explanation, but it was, it's not like you do in Darker Shade of Magic, where you're kind of going with Cal, and then you have the extension of the magic system in Gathering of Shadows with the Essentosh. Like, you don't get that whole full roundedness of the kind of two different magic systems in this book. It's kind of expected that you know.
And then on top of that, to add in Tessa's magic of the threads, you'd just be like, how does the magic work in this? Is it all connected? Who can do this? I think it would definitely have thrown me off. And I feel kind of bad because I definitely think I'm hitting hard the element of who would start here. But as far as overall thoughts, I definitely really enjoyed continuing on with these characters. So, Steph was bringing up that, and Jesse too, that it was surprising how much we were actually still with the original characters. For me, it was a pleasant surprise, because I know a lot of people have mixed feelings or just hate some of the characters in the series, but they, at the very least, to me, are very distinct characters, and I do feel connected to them. So I was excited to get to follow them still. And Conjuring of Light leaves certain things, like Cal losing his magic. He can use it still, obviously, but there's the pain associated with it now. Some of those bittersweet moments where there is a lot left to expand on, and then to actually sit with them and watch that expansion, I really liked. So it was kind of a hard, this one almost feels like a middle book. You know how a lot of times in trilogies, the middle books are trying to connect you to the first book and then lead you to the third. And this one, we had to connect us to the original trilogy and then set up for this new one. And for me, it worked, but I completely agree that the beginning was much slower. It was a lot of not only reminding you of who's who and what's what, but then filling you in with everything that had happened in the meantime, like what Roger was saying with Nadia and these new dynamics between the characters. I did like that. So I'm with Jesse, where it didn't bother me. I was still intrigued and I was enjoying getting to see where things were. But I do think it picked up, and then the plot got more interesting once we pushed forward. So we kind of all have hit on the pacing a little bit. I think a big thing is everybody agrees, even if they liked the beginning, that it was slower. At what point, what was an exact moment that made you excited, or you're like, oh, now I'm invested? Or was there a part where you realized, like, oh, I don't want to stop reading now, I'm actually really into it? So Kristen, I'll let you start that one too.
I think for me, it was as soon as Lila got called upon to, repay the debt of her favor. That was when I was like, okay, this is fascinating.
Seeing the threads come together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The fragile threads.
Yeah. And Steph, it took you maybe the longest out of the group, you and Roger, I think, right?
Yeah, I would say that like 50% in, I found myself like, okay, I'm liking what's happening. But truly, it was like 75% where I was like, okay, I want to know how this is going to end. I don't know. I just really struggled with the pacing a lot. So yeah, I guess it would be 75% probably is when I couldn't put it down.
Was it the fact that we had to be filled in, or was it that you just didn't really care what was happening? Are you able to figure out?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of the, like, we were just being filled in on things, and maybe the fact that I had just reread the trilogy where I was like, okay, yeah, I know all this.
Right.
And I also, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I feel I kind of laugh a little bit about the magic system because it's like there were so many holes from the original trilogy within the magic system. So then to add in this new element of it, but be vague about it, I was like, what's going on? So I just struggled with that. I think that played into the pacing for me as well.
The magic is very much that there's the elemental magic, there's the Antari, and then there's also like spells and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I guess it's just like most things anything goes for the most part.
Anything goes. It's a magical world.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the box at the end where it just like won't stop with its portal vortex and everything. Yeah. There's always mysteries. I think that's what's it's intriguing and frustrating at the same time is she pulls you in with the like, what the heck is going on? And then in the original trilogy, like you were saying, there's still some stuff that you're like, I still don't know how this works. And then we still haven't gotten answers to certain things. So I am wondering if by the end of this new trilogy, if we'll get a lot more of those, or if there's just going to be more unanswered questions. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm hoping
probably all of the above. Although I think it took me, like I said, probably less time to like really get invested. I can't think of like a specific like this moment, but I was super hooked by was it Corsica in White London?
Really?
I was just fascinated by that story and that subplot. I don't know why I wanted more of it. Like we could have stayed in White London and I would have probably been super happy because I don't know why. Like in the first trilogy, I was like, oh, that's okay. Like the Danes in Holland. I was like invested in this like teenage queen.
That was what I liked.
That really hooked me. Really?
Yeah.
I was into her.
I did like that plot line. I mean, I think it was better than because in the second book, A Gathering of Shadows, just like they have the tournament and then every now and then sprinkled in, it's just like Holland is talking to Otheron, and then you just come back and you're like, when's this gonna come into the picture? And it was a little repetitive, but you can tell it's building, and then as soon as it actually comes into the picture, it's the third book now. So yeah. I liked that. I do think all of the criticisms about the pacing I don't disagree with by any means, but I will say I think that the pacing of the White London intrigue was better in my opinion as compared to A Gathering of Shadows.
Yeah.
Roger, what did you think of the pacing? I know I already kind of know.
I think the first 30% was a little harder for me, mainly just because once I realized that we were sticking with our main cast, I wanted to kind of follow them immediately after to see Rye dealing with his parents both being gone. We never really unpacked any of that. It's just done. Now he has a kid and he's in this throuple, and it's just like, oh, okay, this is very different. Sure, fine. And then Kel and Lila, their relationship didn't really feel any different to me in this book than it did in previous books. So I didn't really see their relationship mature. I didn't feel like they felt like partners, like I kind of wanted them to feel. I was kind of confused, like, are they together? Are they still a situationship? Like, I don't even know like what they are to each other. I'm very confused.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought of them as like partners.
But they don't act very much like it. They don't have very good communication for a partnership.
No, they don't. I think I would have been more disappointed if Lila was all of a sudden like cuddly.
It's not all of a sudden. It's
soft.
7 years later. It's
I don't care.
Decade.
Yeah, she's not really changed.
Ever like soft and like cuddly.
That's a
and
decade.
like.
So she's in her mid to late 30s, right? Because they were in their 20s in the first trilogy.
Are they?
I thought she was younger than that.
I don't remember.
I
but like a decade and you act the same. Come on. But anyways, so the first 30%. Dealing with that, and I didn't feel like the flashbacks were that impactful to me. I was like, why are we in this random ice place doing some random stuff in this random festival? Sure, whatever. Kel's in pain, fine. And then I think once the box plotline started kicking in and we started kind of fixing and tinkering with the box and we started having everybody converge on Red London, that I liked it more. Like I was more intrigued, but I still wasn't sold. And it wasn't until like towards the very end when we started having all the backstabbing of Tess getting taken and then trying to escape and then doing all the stuff where the plot really kicked into high gear that I was like, okay, let's go. So it wasn't probably till the very end.
I looked it up, and Delilah's only 19 in the first, and it's been 7 years, so she's only 26.
Okay.
I mean, I acted much different from 19 to 26. That's a very formative part of your life, theoretically speaking.
Yeah. I mean, she's
still young, sure.
Yeah, and she's still Delilah Bard. She still has her hang-ups. She's weirdly like mellowed out a little bit. She's not as quick to just stab and ask later. So at least there's that. But she is, the fact that she keeps the ring, I'm like, oh, she is letting herself care about people.
I mean, it's not that it's not realistic. I know people that act the same now as they did in the beginning of their relationship. I just don't necessarily like my brother and his wife.
Want to read about it.
They've been together since junior high, and they bickered then and they bicker now, and it's like however much longer later. So like I get it, but it's not fun.
Right.
Not fun.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. For me, the moment, so I was interested the whole time. Because I knew the book was almost 650 pages, I'm like, it's probably going to be a while before we really get settled. And we have new things introduced, the filling in that we talked about. But I just kept waiting. I'm like, where's Holland? That's what I kept thinking. I'm like, I know this guy's still around, at least in some fashion. Where is Holland? So when we finally got to the end of the one part, and then Kosaka walks in and he's there, I'm like, there we go. So that's the part where I was like, finally, and I was really into it. Because I was invested before that, but I was very excited when he entered the picture. I am curious with Holland, though. What do we think's going on there? Do we have any, thoughts, predictions?
Oh, yeah. I do not think that is Holland. I think that's Oseron, and I think that he's just using Holland's face because it's one that Kosaka would trust. Especially like at the end when he was like encouraging her to spark the magic again. I was like, oh no. Holland sacrificed his life for this. Like, I don't think this is him.
I go back and forth because I thought the same thing where I'm like, oh, it's clear. But then I'm like, some of his reactions seem too genuinely Holland-like, but it doesn't always feel like the same Holland. He seems to go back and forth. So there's a part of me that's like, is he still somewhat like, has Oseron become a part of him now? And he's got this like dual personality or something? And I just want to know, how is he able, if it is him, like, how is he even able to stick around? What's going on? I don't want him to be dead. That's the thing. I don't actually want him to be gone because he's my favorite.
I know.
And he deserves to see White London thrive.
He does.
He's been through so much. So what are everybody else's thoughts on that? Do we think it's not really him? Do we think it's a mix? It is him, but there's something going on.
I was thinking maybe it's like some kind of echo, like somehow something about him, something about the Antari blood magic, like maybe a piece of him is somehow tied into the magic of White London, but it's
shadow.
Not. Yeah,
that's all I could think of too. That's kind of my thought
locked
too.
Away.
Is that it's like some kind of shadow? But like maybe he might be partly Oseron, but like partly still holding on to Holland. But I have no idea. I'm just like maybe.
And there is the age-old question. Anytime in any book, where's the body? Anytime you don't know where the body went, I have questions. So I'm like, we know he can recover because there's a big thing in the original trilogy is it's so hard to kill an Antari. So I'm like, does somebody keep his body and has been kind of trying to help it come back? And is there something going on with that? And I forget what they're called, the like Veer or something, his personal guards, like has one of them been trying to bring him back to life this whole time? And I don't know, but
possible.
Steph, did you have any theories with that or predictions?
They're not real theories. Like it's just, I'm curious because he spent time in Black London, when everything happens with Oseron or whatever, and he lets him in. I'm curious if like that changed a part of him and that's how he is able to do what he's doing currently, because it echoes very much what Oseron did to Holland is what Holland is doing to Kosaka, except he's not saying like let me in, but he is asking her to do things for him. So it feels very reminiscent of that second book where we're seeing him kind of being lured in by this idea that he can survive if he lets in Oseron. So I do think it's partly Black London related. Is it Oseron? I'm not sure. But I wanted to know, did y'all know that it was his body in the prologue? Am I the only one who like missed that?
I think because it was
Don't
just such a
remember.
big thing that stood out to me when we finished the trilogy,
Mhm.
with like him just like resting against that tree and then the ambiguous wording.
Yeah.
So I was pretty sure it was him,
Okay.
Yeah, I
I
was
wasn't
pretty
sure
sure,
what
but it wasn't like
but
explicit.
Steph's
But
like, who is this person?
I did.
Who is
I
this
was sitting
body?
there and I was like, is that supposed to be Helen? I don't think so.
But it's like, is the body actually dead? What happened to the body? Where is the like?
Yeah.
There's a body.
Well, and I guess it's just it doesn't quite it's not that it doesn't make sense, just we don't have the answers yet as to why it took so long for, because at first he's like appearing in her dreams and then he can appear more around her and nobody else can see him. So it's just like, what is leading to him having more like he's less incorporeal than he was previously? Like, how is that, what's affecting that? How is that working?
I'm wondering if it's
That's
because
why-
White London is getting stronger and stronger and getting more and more magic. Like he is, it kind of seems to correlate with that. Like the more magic and like the stronger that White London is getting, the more, I guess, like corporeal he is becoming.
That's why I thought that he's somehow tied into White London,
Mm-hmm.
because his trajectory seems to match with whatever they're. And maybe it's because she's bleeding so much into the world that she's making some kind of weird thread.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it seems like White London started to, like, there was something that happened when he may or may not have died at the end of the third one, where it seemed like White London had some form of restoration. So then, is it like an extension of that? And then there's the question that she herself, that Kosika asks herself of, did I take his powers somehow? And are they connected in some way? And so, like we were saying before, so many new questions now, and I'm very frustrated because I'm gonna have to wait a while before we get the next book.
Yeah.
And like she's never
Besides-
going to answer any of them anyway. She likes to just pose questions and then kind of move on. Like she's really going to explain how it worked. This is 4 months in.
I would think that we're gonna get some explanation to some of this stuff, but how much and to what extent, I don't know. But how were there other surprises for you throughout the book? Because I just kept waiting for that Holland moment. But were there any moments? So I have here surprises and then also standout moments, which we can talk about good and or bad as well. So what are the things that really stood out to you throughout this book? Everybody's got to think about it for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know the one thing, like at first, I was not down with Rye being married to this queen. Because I remember
Yeah.
messaging y'all and be like, what is going on? I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I get that it's a power play. I don't know how I feel about it. But then as it went on, I surprisingly quite enjoyed this like thruple ship that they had going on. Like,
I liked the new. I liked her a
too.
lot.
I liked her a
thought she was
lot.
interesting.
It was just that I think initial shock of when they were like the queen. And for some reason, I think when they were talking about the queen, I don't know why I was assuming they were talking about the dead queen, like his mom.
Mhm.
For a minute, they're like, oh, well, the queen had made this. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, I didn't even, but they're like, his wife and I'm like, what? Hold on. Like, I feel like I need to back up for a second. I've missed that. But
I
then
have to say,
did end up really liking her and her dynamic with Alucard. So that like it
Same.
surprised me that I liked it that much.
Roger's making faces.
Roger's making faces.
I really like when Delilah interacts with Ren, and it's like no matter how standoffish or rude she was, the little girl is just even more. And isn't that how it always goes? The adult that cares the least about the kids that are around them is the one the kids are always gravitating toward.
Yes.
So I liked that little exchange.
I did too.
And I mean, I liked Nadia being very very much like, I would love to research you, and very invested in her studies, I'll say. I
Mhm.
enjoyed that.
She's like, I'll dissect you, but not till after you're dead. It's
Yeah.
Yeah. Kristen, were there surprises or standout moments for you?
So surprise, but it's more character related is so going back to the original trilogy, the first time that I read it, I liked Lila. And then when we just reread it, she got on my nerves a lot. And now reading this book, I liked her again. And I'm curious if I maybe just don't like her on audiobook. Because I don't know why my feelings would have like changed so many times.
That's funny. Well, okay, I have to say, Michael Kramer, whenever it's a Cal perspective, but Lila's there, gives her like the Lopin voice from Stormlight Archive, where I'm like, why are you giving her that voice? And then the narrator for A Darker Shade of Magic was different than the other books, and that one gave her a really interesting voice. So I'm like, I have to say, the new narrator who does Tess's perspective, I loved every voice she gave every character. I liked that narrator a lot.
Mhm.
There's a little part of me, like, I've just heard Michael Kramer and Kay Redding so many times. But with this new one, I'm like, wow, I really like her voice. I liked how she did Tess. I liked the voice she gave to Lila Bard. I just really liked her narration. So I kind of wish the whole thing had been narrated by her, if anybody gets the chance to listen to the audiobook. But that's really funny that you say that, Kristen, because I noticed the narrators a number of times. I'm like, what are they doing with this voice for her? It's a decision they made.
Agreed.
Yeah. What about for you, Steph?
Oh, when Rye's kid just was casually talked about, I was like, let's say what? I mean, I get it. Like, it makes sense. It's 7 years later. He has to keep the throne, like all that. But I think the biggest surprise is like just these new elements that she's added that I don't love and I don't hate. Like, I'm curious if they'll get fleshed out well enough, because I feel like we're now learning more about the Maresh line and how they have to keep the throne, and if he can't maintain, like how it will move on to a different family, and this new threads magic system and these new characters. And but the biggest surprise bad for me is that I did really want to know more about Kosika and Tess, because I do love our original characters and I'm glad that we got to be with them, but I really wanted to get to know these new characters more, and I feel like they had less page time than anyone else.
It took a long time. Tess had one perspective, I think, in the first part, and she really took a backseat for a long time. It was kind of just like, she's here, by the way, which was surprising to me when, one, it kind of seems like she's the person on the cover. Yeah. And in the synopsis, it seems like it's going to be mostly about her. So just kind of echoing what we talked about at the beginning of the surprise at the fact that there's just so much of our main cast. But I agree, Steph, that I would have liked to have seen. I think maybe I'm fine with the amount of Kosika we got. And I don't know if I think that we needed Tess's perspective interwoven more like evenly. I kind of liked that when we did zero in on her, we got to spend a fair amount of time just sticking with her. But I'm more curious about her sister and her father. There, for like a half a second, I was like, is one of her sisters like actually Delilah Bard and just didn't like, she doesn't remember or something? And then I'm like, no, that's obviously not what's happening here. But yeah, I want to know more about her family, and I'm wondering if they're going to enter the picture. I will say one thing that wasn't a surprise at all was who the antagonist was. I'm like, it's clearly Alucard's brother. You know, like that one for me wasn't surprising at all.
I thought you were talking about the other one later.
Just that, like, who was involved with the hand and all of that stuff. I'm like, I feel like it's his brother.
Yeah. That one I got, but the reveal after that, who was pulling his strings?
The woman?
The new Avanescen.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty obvious too.
I thought it was obvious, but I was like, I still like it.
I feel like they're right. I feel like they're leading you to believe it's Nadia.
It's the queen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah. I think they led you too hard to believe that it was Nadia.
Yeah.
If it would have been like more subtle, then maybe. But it was like, hey, it was taken from her stuff. It's her magic. And you're like, it's a little too obvious. It's too obvious that, like, okay, well, the queen is betraying him.
Yeah, I agree.
But I still like that
Roger.
they made it the new Avanescen.
Yeah. Roger, surprises, standout moments. I feel like you have thoughts.
I hated that Ryan was part of a throuple. I thought it was so stupid because I thought the original trilogy was much more, it felt more queer normative. Like it wasn't a big deal that he and Alucard were together, and then for it to all of a sudden like kind of shift. And I wish if they were going to do something like that, that it'd be more like how Mask of Mirrors does it, where you can like adopt and it's not necessarily like by the bloodline. Because I don't feel like there's anything that special about the Maresh bloodline that it would have to be a blood relative. And so I was just kind of like, it felt queer normative, and then it wasn't anymore. And there had to be this queen that he had to have a baby with, and I was like, okay, fine. And I hated her because I'm so sick of that like evil mustache twirling scientist that just can't look beyond their research, and they just do stupid things that break the world because they can't control. I hate it so much. I hate it. So she drove me up a wall pretty much the whole time. So she was a negative surprise.
I think I feel a little differently about the amount of emphasis on bloodlines, because I thought that felt pretty strong in the third book and the second book, where they're like talking about Alucard's family versus the Maresh line. I wonder if though it would feel stronger if we'd read the comics that follow his father. I think they follow his father, the Steel.
For me, it
Trails.
just felt like the houses. Yeah. It felt like a house, not necessarily a bloodline. So like in my mind, I was thinking more like Game of Thrones houses or like Mask of Mirrors houses, where like you can have other people in it. I didn't necessarily feel like there's something about his blood that brings some kind of special sauce that like makes him have to be on the throne. You know what I mean? Like, and so for him to have this kid out of nowhere, I'm like, but why? The girl was
That's
cute.
Interesting, though.
Her interactions with Lila were cute. But like the queen, I was like, just shove her out the window. Like, my God.
Well, especially considering that Rye doesn't have magic. I'm so curious, like, what makes their bloodline so special if he doesn't have magic? And that was a point of contention within this book generally. So I'm like, why does bloodline matter? Because like Kel is adopted into the family, and he's obviously stronger than any of them.
Well, plus I feel like they've made the biggest deal about how magic doesn't follow bloodlines. So I'm like, well, why does the bloodline matter? Because that's been a huge theme throughout that like magic chooses who it wants. It doesn't follow blood. They've made it like abundantly clear. I feel like they've used that exact phrase over and over. So I didn't like that at all.
I kind of liked though that because he, we see that he is interested in men and women. So I do at least like that it wasn't some kind of like forced where he's not really interested at all.
But he's not interested in the queen.
He's
like they don't
interested
feel
in.
No, I'm not saying that he's not attracted to women, but I feel like there's not really. They're just like a partnership of convenience almost, where she wants the ability to do her science because she's mad scientist who can't help herself, and it's going to create an atom bomb, and then. Like, but I don't feel like they have they're not really chemistry or like a strong anything. They're just together to have a baby. And I didn't feel like that added for me.
Yeah. I think I wonder if I didn't feel the same way as you, since in the third book, A Conjuring of Light, it kind of talks about his father and mother having that same sort of arrangement where she like was very tentative to be with anybody. She was scared to be a mother, but it's like what made sense for the politics and stuff. But I don't disagree that the whole emphasis on bloodlines, it just seems like a thing that we've tied in because that's what we're accustomed to in our own world, and like the worlds influence each other, but that bloodline doesn't seem like it should matter that much. I do wonder why it's because it kind of just seems like a thing that we fall back on in fantasy in general. Like, well, put this bloodline. You're like, but why this bloodline?
But why?
Because that's what it's like in our own world. So I wonder if it's just more so supposed to be like, well, that's how it is in Grey London, our world. And, they have these similarities. I don't know. Or maybe it's like a way. Go ahead.
I think I'm more sensitive to that kind of thing because it's so rare that you have like a strong male-male romance relationship on page that for it to have to like dip back into like more traditional heteronormative stuff is just like, oh, of course we have to do this nonsense.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because one of the things I was surprised by that I forgot to even mention was that I was kind of expecting going into this that Kel and Alucard were just married and that was that. I didn't actually, when they mentioned a queen and then a daughter, I was like, wait, what are we doing here? So I did think that they were, when it first was introduced, I did think that they were a throuple, that they all fell in love with each other or something. But then when it was explained, I was like, why isn't it just Rye and Alucard? Because that's clearly what they both want. So I don't know.
I think
like
I
Chris
had that same
too.
reaction because I was like, oh, well, then maybe they just like fell in love with their third and like it's a cute throuple. But I did like her interactions with Alucard. They're like bickering.
I did too, and I liked, like, I felt like she was at least respectful and she like understood her place. Like she knew that she was never going to be never going to be able to hold a candle to Alucard
Oh, yeah.
when it came to Rye. But I'm glad that you brought that up too, because I didn't think about that at all. But that's like a really interesting point.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way either, but like you bringing it up.
Yeah, I'd seen I was a little frustrated because I feel like, so I talked to you guys about this. So some of the artwork that was put out ahead of time, definitely, I'm like, all right, well, now I know a lot of these things and who's going to be in this. So I don't know if I just like kind of already in my head had this idea like, oh, this is how it's going to be. So it wasn't as big of a surprise. And maybe I had time to become accustomed to it before I even was there with it.
I also don't judge you if you liked it. Like, I'm not like, you're now a homophobe.
Well, no, because the book itself isn't putting down like their relationship. No. I think I would have been really frustrated if it was like Alucard now has to be in prison because they found out that he's intimate with, like, if it was something like that, I'd be like, really?
Oh, I would have rage quit. I would have thrown the book out the window.
You would have thrown the book.
Owned it.
But I like that.
I think most people would have.
Yeah. But I like that Alucard and him still had their relationship. They still seemed sweet with each other, and I did like the dynamic between the three of them, although you don't get very many scenes with all three of them at the same time. I will say the person who seems to like the daughter the least is Rye. Like, he's hardly interacting with her. Like, Alucard seems really in love with her and like loves to spoil her, and the queen seems like very protective of her, and she kind of has an interesting way of looking at her daughter of like, I wonder what this thing will
when she was like, I'm just gonna have this kid, and like the way she describes having a kid like cracked me up.
Yeah.
Like, basically, like, I just wanted to see what would happen. Like, it's a science experiment birthing a child. Like, it cracked me up. As someone who's been through that process, I was just like, oh, that's too much work for a science experiment.
I think too, part of the whole like concept of like bloodlines versus why can't they just adopt a kid or something is, I think they touch on it in regards to, since we see in the original trilogy, there's already that negativity toward Rye not having any magic. And it's such a big part of his character that if he were to just like pick someone who had magic, I think that people would be like, well, then why are you even allowed to rule? And it would almost delegitimize his own throne if he just adopted someone versus having a child and then hoping that she gets magic too, so that he can be like, see, we're not running out of magic, everybody, because I think the only thing he's got right now to have legitimacy is his bloodline. I just wish that, like what you were saying, there was an emphasis as to why bloodlines. I think they did talk about it a little bit with lore about the Maresh were the first ones to protect everybody from the original when like all the magic started to flood through. And then they were the ones that kind of shut it off, and that gained them legitimacy in people's eyes. And then they haven't really switched houses since then, even though maybe there is some reasons why it would make sense. So one of my, I guess, predictions for the rest of the series is I wonder if Rye is going to recognize that this is not the best way, and that we're not saying we're going to have like a democracy and then everything's going to be exactly like our own modern governments or something. But I wonder if he's going to recognize that there's too much of an imbalance between his life and the lives of a lot of other people. So that's one thing I'm curious about, because it does seem to make such an emphasis on he doesn't have magic. He's really hopeful his daughter has magic. Is magic running out? And is there actually some truth to the Hand's claims and stuff? I wonder, because Oseron went from Black London and they're like layered. And since he's in Grey London now, I wonder if it's like a shockwave type of thing where now Red London is the one that's next to that large power source, you could say. And that's why Red London's having its weird effects, but then White London's doing better because White London's doing like what Red London did before, so they've swapped. I wonder if that's part of what's going on, but I don't know.
Along those lines, I was wondering if because I was wondering if there's kind of like a finite amount of magic, and because White London is doing better, that's why Red London is not doing as well.
That's my
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking along those lines, like, not that there's like a finite amount, but it's just like, well, it's kind of like cyclical, and it's like, well, White London's doing better, so Red
Yeah.
London's doing not good.
Yeah,
Though I
that's
wish we
what
got more of Grey London. We got like a tiny bit, and that was I enjoyed seeing little Ned again.
Yeah.
I'm helping
He
Tess.
was so excited.
When she's like, I can see you have magic. He's like, really?
Yeah. And they're not
Yeah.
supposed to.
Yeah. Were you going to say something a second ago, Steph?
Oh yeah, that's my prediction too about the balance of magic. My assumption is that like I'm assuming that she's basing it off of just magic lore in general, that magic has to be in balance. And so that's why you're seeing that the Londons all have varying levels of tapping into magic. I feel like because White London is now having the ability to kind of heal and their magic is coming back more abundant, you're seeing Red London starting to lose that because magic has to have balance. So I'm just assuming that. And then we also know that the doors are weakening. So I'm curious what that's going to mean for the future.
Do you think Tess is going to make the bond between Kel and Rye? Do you think she's going to undo it, or is that not possible because would Rye just die if that happened? Or
I was wondering about that too when she was like healing them. I was like, is she going to be able to do that? Is that going to be a thing?
Right.
So,
and the box and the fact that the only time that I was like, I don't know what's going on here is when the box is destroyed. She's kind of like makes a new one, you know, and I'm like, oh, I guess she can just do that because she like knows the threads now or something. I'm like, it's a little ambiguous, but it's fine. But also, I guess Tess is like the most powerful person because she can just replicate the powers of Antari, and it would seem, and I don't know. It's
well, then also, why can she touch the threads, but Alucard can only see them? Like,
right.
Well, I wonder
there's
if
many questions.
Maybe he can. Like maybe.
Well, then he was like questioning himself. Like,
yeah.
Well, no, but he tried. He tried, and he moved through.
But I wonder if she's gonna like help him
figure
out how to do it. Maybe.
And I like
that. The obvious thing is that we're going to start opening the doors again. That Red London and White London are going to start getting in closer communication because she's going to want to bring Kosaka in contact with everybody else. And then we're going to start messing with these doors, and that might wake up Oseron again.
I don't know.
I still think it's got something to do with King George.
I don't know if we're going to do another like repeat of Oseron, but I do wonder if we're going to get like, instead of him as
but he's already been lurking because she saw his threads when she was in London. She saw the black threads when she was in the inn.
Right. I was just saying though, I don't know if we're going to see him in this like human-like where he has more emotions and stuff, and if it's going to be more of a force this time around where it's even more chaos, because he was so human-like, because he had so much time to develop this conscience. So I wonder if it's just going to be
or you're right, he's just going to start messing with people with weird little shadows, with Holland Shadow and whoever else Shadow. And
I'm sticking by that he's King George.
I just want Holland to come back and to like live in London and then be happy.
Be happy.
Yeah. I want. He deserves it.
I want happy Holland too.
So I am curious. I thought that Shades of Magic and Threads were written further apart from each other, but I looked at the date, and the last book in the trilogy came out in 2017, and then this one obviously is this year. How do you think they compare? Do you feel like there is an obvious difference in her writing or anything like that between them? What do you think of just how they compare, both for you personally and then just her as a writer?
I think they were pretty on par.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think especially like listening to them back to back, like binging all of them and then reading it like right away. Like they definitely flowed really well together.
Yeah,
I don't think there was like a lapse or like.
Yeah, it was the same. It was a consistent voice, and I feel like it was a consistent like storytelling.
I do think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Kristen.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do think that she and this is subjective, it just comes down to people's personal preferences, but I think she feels like she has the reader's trust now that she can take a little more time to develop the world and describe the area they're in. And because especially A Darker Shade of Magic, it just goes so fast because the whole thing takes place in 24 to 48 hours pretty much, right? It just flies by. And then the third book also, for the most part, flies by until they go to the ship and stuff like that. But it seems like she feels comfortable trusting that the reader is going to have the patience to be with these characters and get to know the world a little bit better. We all, I think, want even more of the world and the magic, but it to me seemed like she's more trusting of this being more like epic in scope and not that I'm a stickler with the labels, but like high fantasy versus epic fantasy. Mm-hmm. I think the original trilogy maybe falls under high fantasy, and this one's starting to lean toward epic with there being more characters, more connection between the worlds, more going on, and no pun intended, but there's like more threads to explore now, which is exciting. And I think that's why the pacing didn't bother me as much, because I was excited.
The stakes are arguably bigger in the original trilogy than they are, at least in this first book.
Yeah, this first book, I agree. This first one is
low stakes wise, but I feel like I kind of agree with what you said, Elle, with it feeling like a second book. It felt kind of like it's going to bridge between the first series and the continuation series.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe it should be under predictions, but I feel like maybe we are going to lean away from our older characters the more we go in. It's like, okay, well, this is a book, like this is kind of bridging between, so we're going to get much more Lila and Kel, and then as we continue on, we'll get more like Corsica and Tess in like books 2 and 3. I don't know how many.
I don't think that we'll lean away from Kel and Lila, though, because it was such a big point that she brought Kel's magic back.
Yeah. I don't think we'll lean away, but I think it'll be right. Like, screw him. No. But I think we will
just
get
that we're
more.
going to expand the other ones.
I just hope we don't just keep getting longer and longer and longer books.
Stormlight Archive style.
No, I just hope it's not Sarah J. Maas.
I was thinking like Shadowhunters, where it's like, what?
I wonder too if we're going to build the stakes throughout the trilogy. Mm-hmm. And that's because it did feel like she was okay letting the stakes be a little bit more contained, and maybe the plot wasn't as cohesive, but I wonder if it's going to build upon itself throughout because I think it's going to be a trilogy also. I know it says 2 and 3 are definitely announced.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we're going to build in that way. I'm just still so curious about like what's going on with what happened with that box. It wasn't really a box in the end. But just everything. And also, I guess, the woman, I forget her name, the woman that's on the ship kind of brought somebody back to life. Right? So that's why I'm like, is something going on? Did someone, is like a possible, something like that, yeah. So that's why I'm kind of like, is Holland, I feel like if this is possible, maybe Holland is gonna have his body back. I don't know. I'm gonna let that go though, because I keep talking about wanting that to happen like every different.
You're like, bring Holland back.
But Holland
back.
Yeah.
And happy. We want Holland back and happy.
Happy Holland. We need to make shirts that say Happy Holland. I remember when I went to her signing with The Conjuring of Light, she was like, Holland just needs a hug. And I'm like, he does. Happy Holland hugs. That's what we need.
Yes. And she did not give him that.
No. Anyway, back to this. Roger, did you have thoughts on the difference between threads and shades?
Shades felt more meandery, for good or ill. Like, I think she did take her time more with character moments. It wasn't necessarily character moments in the way that I wanted them, because there's a lot of like flashbacks to kind of feel like it, to band-aid some stuff in. And I don't know, like, I wish I got more world building answers and less just kind of throwing everything we knew out the window, because now it feels almost like it's channeling from Wheel of Time, where you can pull on weaves of fire or air depending on who you are. And I'm just like, okay, but like, it was cooler before when it felt more like Avatar: The Last Airbender, less.
I wonder if we're gonna, in hindsight, if she has all the answers and she's only giving us so much, and then by the end of this trilogy,
I hope so.
that would be great because then the rereadability would be fun. Because like we've said, Alucard clearly has had the ability to see this stuff for a long time, but then why can't, like you said, he touch it? And then what Kristen was saying, is he going to learn then, or is there a whole other thing with that where like is it? I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Because it
to
currently
see.
felt like what we did know was chucked out the window, and now it's just like completely like, okay, I have no idea how this magic works anymore. Never mind. Cool.
Yeah, I
Because
wonder
now
if
the
like
Antares are just a different kind of thread, and like, okay, well, where does the silver thread come from? If that's Antares specific, why are their threads silver versus normal elemental threads? Like, I'm just like, I don't know anything anymore. It's all just like, okay.
Keeping you on
And
your
I think
toes.
I wonder if that's also just such a difference between fantasy readers in general. Is I know you and I have had this come up in other things. I am more invested in characters, and I want really cool worlds. I want really cool magic. I want all that stuff, but all of that kind of, at least in a first read through, tends to come second to the characters for me. And then I think that's what makes rereading so fun, is then I can feel more like I understand. And then also I have all the information. So then I like really fully comprehend. But I think other times, and there's of course like a, there's a fluctuation of how much. It's not like we're on one extreme or the other. But I do think for some fantasy readers, it's the magic in the worlds and the world building that is what they want to see. And the characters doesn't really matter as long as they're not so annoying they ruin the book for them, kind of thing. But I'm just like, oh, another interesting thing that I'll have to keep in the back of my mind, because I like the theorizing too between books and series. And when you have more answers, I feel like it's harder to, well, it depends, because sometimes it's like you have certain answers, but there's this one little mysterious thing that you're like, wait a second, how can I use the information I have to solve this? And with shades and threads, it's kind of like, I don't know. We'll find out at some point, maybe, I guess.
Well, because for me, it's more like, will it end up feeling like it was all intentional all along, or was this just you had a new idea and it shifted? Like, it'll see how we pan out with it. Because if it feels like all of a sudden the magic is just completely different, I'll probably be really annoyed about it.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping she had this plan all along.
I think she has, just from having, I know we talked about this in I think the previous live show, but just knowing that she always planned for there to be more books, but then with all of her experiences with publishing in the past, with the archive series and stuff like that, I think she felt like she had to kind of close the door on Shades and then maybe come back to it if able. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to believe that she's laid those hints, because especially in A Conjuring of Light, clearly like she had the plan for Delilah to owe this debt, and she had she had like these things in mind. So I agree. I hope that it is intentional. Maybe some certain other sparks came to her as she was writing it, where she's like, ooh, this is going to work perfect. So maybe there's like filler that she's put in, but I hope that the big picture, how everything works, is in her brain, and then she'll share that with us.
But I guess the one thing nobody's mentioned is Varys is adorable. I really like weird, creepy skeleton owl.
Oh my god, I love the owl.
Wait. I have his name. I had him ready to bring up. He is so cute.
I love him. I want one.
I kind of liked that when Delilah grabbed it. I think it said that she yelped or like she screamed or something, which was so anti-Delilah.
Not Lila.
That I'm like, does she not like owls? I don't know.
So,
I just like
that mouse.
Yeah. I liked that she had a very uncharacteristic moment where she actually acted like the thing that finally made her not so tough was this like silly little mechanical owl thing. I have to say, a tiny, it's not really I guess it's kind of criticism, but the Delilah's so overpowered that we need her to have fun in fights by picking a single element. I'm like, or you could just end the fight, That was one thing where I'm like, it fits her character, so I'm not upset about it. But there were a couple times I'm like, just like bring all the powers together and kill this person right now, and you don't have to deal with them later.
There were, I think I told you, Elle, that's like the one thing that bothered me was Lila somebody needs to teach her to say please.
It's the cheesy tie your arm behind your back.
Like, you can't just like, she bothered me because it's like somebody needs to smack her upside the head and be like, if you just say please, people are more likely to do
her communication skills are kind of lacking in general. Like, please is kind of like just.
But she was like, "You're gonna help heal him." She's like, "Absolutely not."
Yeah, because I messaged you. I messaged you back, and there was a part of me that's like, "Yeah, Tess, heal him. He's a good guy."
Right? It's like, just say,
I really
hey, would you mind please helping me? And Tess probably would have been more likely to say,
I did really like that Tess and Delilah are such different personalities, but have such similar resistance to being tied down. Yes. And it's in a different way, but Tess is like, I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to be a tool for someone else. I want to live my own life. And that similarity. So I really hope that we get kind of a cool friendship between her and Delilah, especially when you got that little backstory that at one point Delilah grabbed her when she was trying to steal from her and told her, if you're going to steal, make sure you get away with it.
Yeah.
That kind of like mentor figure, I guess.
Right.
I don't know if anybody should, be her.
I don't know if she should mentor
protege.
anybody, but I do think that she had slight softening. Not a lot, but a slight softening. Like the moment where she's like, all right, I'm just going to stay at the hotel, or like at the inn at the hotel, same difference. And she's like trying to sleep and she's like, oh, fine. And it's like she goes and like cuddles up in bed next to Kel, like at the palace. And she's like, don't wake up. Like she has to go cuddle up next to him, but she doesn't like admitting that.
I do
like
like
how she's
to
like,
early
I threw
on.
the ring out. And then like, but really
She didn't.
she didn't.
I did like early on when she considers the other people on the ship basically like her family. She's not so resistant to that word or that concept. She doesn't feel the need to run away because I'm like, good job, growth, Delilah. It's happening finally. So I did appreciate that. I think saying a softening is such a good way to put it. I have to say, this is so stupid, but when I hear soften, I just think of like in recipes when you need to soften butter.
I thought you were going to say like laundry.
We need her to be like a stick of butter just melting so you can like put it on some cinnamon roll dough or whatever. That's what we need for her.
Delicious.
Her overconfidence did come back to get her in the end in that one fight, though. She was like, this is the moment where I should have let go or whatever, and I will be thinking about that forever. So I was glad that she had a moment of like where she was, failing.
This is a weird statement, but when she gets captured and she's getting like beat a lot, I'm not happy. I wasn't like happy, like, yeah, happy that she's hurt. But it was very vivid. Did anybody else feel that way about that moment where I'm like, dang, like I know that I know Kel's probably going to show up and like the ring and all that. So I like the here comes the cavalry sort of situation there. But I was like, dang, she's really taking a beating here. And it was a thing that kind of created a reaction. I liked how it was written is I think what I'm trying to say.
I feel like along with the softening, like even her using the ring shows growth. Because she never wanted to rely on anyone, and she like can admit that she needed help in that moment.
Eventually,
yeah.
One thing that I forgot to complain about was Kel's random ass alter ego, Kay.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
it's basically like role play for him and
it was
Delilah
so stupid and random, and felt like it went nowhere. I was like, okay, whatever. I see Steph agrees with me because she hit her face as soon as I said Kay. She was like, oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He could have picked at least a better name. Like
Kay.
What if Kay is actually his name? Since Kel's not his name,
right?
This is what he goes by.
All it makes me think of every kiss begins with Kay. Like, can we not?
Oh,
you don't want to kiss Kel/Kay all the time?
No.
All the time.
He's too moody and be salty from all his tears.
Oh,
it's salty.
I love my moody boys.
Lila did call him on that too. Like exactly what you said in the last live show. She basically said that to him in the book.
She did kind of tell him to buck up, Buttercup, at one point.
What did she say at one point when I think there was a moment with Tess also, and then Delilah had like a really great line about like, I don't remember what it was gonna say, but she also had a line where she's like, he's gonna go mope or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. I don't mind. Okay, when we were talking about standout moments, I mean, it's probably pretty obvious. When Kel gets his magic back, I was probably the most emotional moment for me because I was like, oh, thank goodness, because just the amount of time where he's trying to be someone else, basically, and I'm like, it's never learning to fight with a sword. It's never going to be the same, And so when he finally got his magic back and he was all emotional about it, I was like, yay.
Plus, good on her for doing it in the first book and not dragging it out to the end of the friggin' end of the trilogy. Thank God for that.
And I didn't think it, even though it's weird because it's not a trope I hate because it's done poorly or anything, in this book or something. It's just one of those things where I'm like, okay, when are they going to get their powers back? Like, let's get them their powers back. So, but I didn't feel the whole book like, oh, geez, like it was a convenience where he was about to get his powers back and then he doesn't for whatever reason. I think she did a good job with it. And I agree.
It was not as annoying as the Jasad heir. That whole book is that friggin' trope. Trash. Hot garbage.
I still haven't read that one.
Me neither.
Well, good luck.
I've been told not to, so I kind of
I know, Sam. I'm like,
Steph, I'm not sure if that face was about that book or just.
It is because I saw a clip of she did it in like a vlog or something, but I haven't seen whatever video it was in.
Yeah.
I do feel kind of bad because I DNF'd that one. Remember when I
As you
said
should. It was not worth
there
it
were-
to finish it.
when I was telling all of you there was a couple books I picked up after reading Shades, and I was like, uh-oh, because I just enjoyed Shades, and then I'm coming to something else that if I had read other things before it, maybe I would have pushed through, but I was like, yeah.
I'm a big
Anywho.
fan of DNFing. DNFing is the best.
Well, that has nothing to do with
No,
this.
but
I was like trying to
DNF
figure
Shades.
out. I was trying to figure out a segue into any other topic. Was already. I'm like now. So just in general, coming back to Threads of Power. Are there any other final thoughts? There's a lot of things that happened in this book, and I'm sure once we're done, we're gonna be like, oh, I completely forgot to bring this up. But were there any other topics or points that we wanted to mention?
Do we want to talk about maybe favorite characters and least favorite characters?
Yeah.
She already
Is
has a banner
everybody's-
ready for it, doesn't she?
Yeah, right.
Guys,
Well, Kristen, who are your favorites?
So Alucard is definitely still my favorite. Love him. I did not like Kosika. I don't know, her perspective was what I found the least interesting, and those were the chapters that kind of dragged for me. Even though like I understood that everything that was happening with her is going to be important, and like we were building, I was still like, I don't really care. I liked Tess a lot. But similarly to you, Elle, I am definitely a character-driven reader versus plot-driven. So I loved getting so much of the original cast, and I loved getting just like moments with our original characters and like just like sweet things between them. Those were the things that really like hooked me, but still overall definitely love Alucard the best.
Steph, sorry, I had to mute you because I'm not sure if you have like a heater in your room or something.
Yeah, my AC is loud. I just don't hear it anymore. My favorite character. I mean, I like Alucard a lot. He's always a favorite, but I think Tess was just like the most interesting to me, and Kosika were the most interesting to me because they were new, and unfortunately, Lila and Kel were really bothering me in this book. But again, it could also be the narration because I have noticed that when I read it physically, they're not as annoying to me as when I listen to it. So I do think it's the audio. But I just liked them a lot. I really liked these new perspectives because when I read the Shades of Magic trilogy, the White London perspectives actually were my least favorite, unless it was about Holland, but usually it wasn't about specifically him. They were my least favorite, and so it was refreshing to come into this one and feel like I liked being in White London, and I was really interested in how they were recovering from the last however many years. And I'm so interested in Tessa's magic and the fact that now she's on the ship. And I feel like that's going to be the moment that we start seeing more of the world and more of the magic system. So yeah, they were probably my favorite just because it was so intriguing for me.
yeah.
What about you, Jesse?
I think Kosika might have been my favorite, like, new character. Cause like I don't know what it was. Like I really liked that moment where she like they were like, oh well, they're all in a meeting, and she's like this little baby teenager basically, and she just like flings open the doors and's like, like why?
Sorry, I'm late. Nobody told me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you forgot. And then like she kills the one guy. Like she's like, no, I'm just gonna solidify the fact that I might be a child, but I'm not. I'm still the queen. So I really liked that and seeing her kind of grow. And I loved her perspective because it's like she really does want to do good for her world. And then, of course, like with Holland being in her perspective chapters, I really enjoyed that. I did love all the new characters, really. I didn't really dislike anybody specifically, but I wish we would have gotten, what was it? The boy that stole from the market.
Oh,
They ended up
merchants.
the merchant's son.
I
I
like
wish
that perspective a lot.
we would have gotten more of him as a like almost villainous kind of perspective. The way we got Holland and we kind of viewed Holland originally in the first series as this kind of anti-villainous-esque character. I wish we would have gotten that like from him.
Do you think he's actually dead? Because it said he didn't wake up, which is the,
I'm thinking Bex.
ambiguous wording.
I'm
You think
thinking
they killed
I think they probably did. Just
Um,
knowing them, like the two.
Yeah.
They were pretty funny though. They added some
They were my least favorite. They were my least
Or-
favorite part of the
I'm
book.
glad we didn't get much of them, so I was okay with them. If we'd have got any more of them, I'd have probably been like, okay.
I think they were just like a hair too corny for me, where I'm like, yeah, they just feel like the kind of classic bad guy. What's the word? When it's just like the underlings. That's
The henchmen.
Yes, thank you. They just felt like bad guy henchmen people. So they were my least favorite. I enjoyed pretty much everybody's perspective. I don't know that I felt like we got enough of Rye. I think I would have liked more Rye in this. But I mean, I enjoyed the new perspectives. I enjoyed coming back to our characters. So it was just these two that annoyed me. But I skipped over. Sorry, Roger. I skipped over you because Jesse gave me too
I mentioned.
good of an opening.
My favorite was probably Rye and Alucard. I liked their dynamic, especially with their kid. I liked that piece without the queen. Besides the queen, I also didn't really like Kosaka. She kind of was really annoying and super bratty, and I found her just kind of tedious. And then that perspective also started to feel a little bit too magical realism-y for me, where it's like, is it real? Is it not? Is it in her head? I don't care. Like, but other than that, and then Cal and Lila were less irritating to me in this one. I still don't think that I buy that was 7 years of relationship development. They feel, unless they got very stuck in the trauma of him losing his magic, which fine, but also like move on. But yeah, I mean, it's the characters feel very similar to how they did in Shades. And if you like that, you're gonna like it. If you don't, then you don't. Except for Holland feels different, and whether that was intentional because he's not maybe all Holland, who knows? But he wasn't the Holland that I remember loving in the original trilogy, for sure.
Yeah. And I think with all of the characters, because we did talk about the Delilah softening, but I think everybody, to me, feels like a slightly more muted version of how they were before, because I feel like I never thought they were caricatures of, like, I didn't ever feel for them the way I feel like Bex and Callan were in this.
Or
for our
Wayne.
main cast. Yeah, none of them are Wayne.
Shut
for
up
me,
with
but,
the Wayne hate.
but I do think that they all they still retained their personalities. They're still the same people. They just feel like they're just tired. I feel like
They're just tired.
Everybody,
They just need
like
a
all
nap.
of us, like we're all passionate about something. We're just quieter about it a lot of times as we get older because we're like, I don't want to argue or I don't want to deal with this. So that's kind of how, because Delilah, it's the most obvious because she was such a force, I guess.
Very
But Kel
bombastic, yeah.
is still moody, and I feel like the poor guy, she just puts him through it a lot. But he's like less outwardly like having, this certain like boo-hoo sort of outlook. Like he's trying at least, which is good.
He was definitely waddling
Rye,
less. He felt like he was
yes.
trying his best.
Yeah. Rye, I think, and like Alucard is still like his usual very sensual, charismatic character, but he's like responsible, and he's I think he just feels more like grown up, I guess, more like manly I guess. I don't mean manly like macho or something. He just feels more like he knows that he has these responsibilities. He knows he can't be quite as free all the time because he has to protect Rye. He cares about his daughter. He has to check in with the queen. So anyway, I just feel like all of them felt a little bit more grown up, even if they still had their issues, which I like. I like it. I told Roger separately from this, but I kind of like when characters are like realistically annoying sometimes and like realistically flawed. You don't want that character that is so annoying it ruins the book for you. And I know that I think that is the case for some people with the original trilogy. But I will say that was one thing, going back to our chat about threads versus shades. I do feel like the characters all feel a little more nuanced and a little bit like the fact that they've gone through things has actually impacted them. So I did like that about them. The one thing that I would say this one has over shades, which would make me want to point people to this one, except for that would never work because we all agreed at the beginning. That would be such a weird place to start. But anyway, are there any other things that we want to mention? Small things or little details or anything like that? Or we're all pretty good? I think we're all pretty good.
I have to wait for another one though. After
I
binging,
know.
Yeah.
I know.
like forgot about this part.
A lot of sequels this year, I felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of just being like, oh, that was great. Well, I gotta wait now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a lot of fun. Tori could not make the chat, but I will still have her linked for anybody that watches this. She was one of our co-hosts, so you would have seen her in the Shades chat and some of our sprints. So definitely check her out. Everybody's channels that's here will be linked in the description bar, so check everybody's channels out. And then we have a playlist where we have various different videos that we've done that are somewhat Schwab inspired. So that will be linked as well. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining me. This is a really fun read along. And I hope everybody at least liked the books that ends up watching this. And if you have any other additional things you want to mention, feel free to do that in the comments. But anyway, thanks everybody. We'll see you later. Bye.